Hello, so I imagine a lot of you probably want me to talk about what happened today with that nuclear reactor attack. And first of all, obviously, like nearly everything going on in this war that let's say Putin's cronies are doing, because obviously it's not the fault of the Russian people that they've been lied to about all of this. But obviously anybody in Russia that actually knows what's going on and then goes along with it, unless they're under threat of death or something, is complicit. I'd actually say, in treason against their own country at this point, especially the people that, are pretending everything's going fine and nothing's going on, because they're getting Russians killed as well as Ukrainians, obviously. But anyway, so if you didn't know, there was, I think, both a single missile attack and several shells launched at a nuclear site, the biggest one in Europe. I can't remember the name of the thing off the top of my head because it's not in English. It wasn't Chernobyl, but obviously the purpose is, if you have a functioning nuclear site, you should never be shelling it full stop. Ideally, what you should do if you wanted to cut off power from it, for example, is just cut the power lines further away from the plant. Because what ends up happening is, if you're shelling indiscriminately near reactor sites, you could either hit the reactors themselves and have a serious problem, hit maybe any of the cooling systems and have a serious problem, or even hit, if there's on site, there's sort of radioactive waste storage before it's disposed of, somewhere else, or recycled, that could be hit, and any one of those can have a serious effect. The reactor being hit for obvious reasons. If enough shells hit a reactor's containment building and the reactor itself, you could blow up the reactor Chernobyl style and spread radioactive waste all across the world. If you destroy the cooling systems for reactor, you can have a meltdown if, the backup generators can't come on or anything like that. And obviously, if you blew up a nuclear waste storage site, you're just going to scatter nuclear waste anywhere, everywhere. So, obviously, attacking a nuclear site like that is disgraceful. I think there's been a couple of times in history where there's been sort of regimes that were trying to make WMDs before, and, there was surgical strikes sort of carried out on some of the reactor stuff before it was put together. And again, that's completely different, because at that point it's not, going to have risk of radioactive leak. It's just trying to stop a project before it begins. I think there was Israeli strike in Iraq like that at one point in history, plus a lot of the sabotage that's been done of the Iranian nuclear sort of program for those sort of reasons, because they think it's going to lead to the development of nuclear weapons or something like that, or a dirty bomb. But anyway, back on topic. So obviously I completely disavow the attack for like anybody with a brain would. Again, I think it's more and more evidence that, NATO will probably end up walking into this conflict at some point, because I don't think Putin's ever going to back down at this point. Now he's just trying to cling to power. But anyway, so apparently potassium iodine sold out everywhere, or stable iodine, which is the ones you take to block your thyroid absorbing iodine. Now, something to point out for people that don't know, that only protects you from iodine 131 being absorbed by the thyroid. If you're encountering radiation, it's no use against lots of forms of radiation. So again, don't buy and use that stuff unless you know how you're using it. There's similar stable isotopes, like there's a stable calcium, I don't know what it's called off the top of my head, and it does a similar thing, but it's to stop strontium-90 and radium-226 going into your bones. Again, it's a good thing to have, but you need to know when and where to use it. You don't just pop loads of the tablets randomly and say, oh, it cures me of radiation. Oh, and it won't stop. It helps stop the radiation being absorbed into the body, but if you take the tablets and it's already got into your body, they're not going to do anything. They're not like rad away from fallout. So obviously you need to know what you're doing. In regards to Geiger counters, so here's my radius scan. Now, unfortunately, if you don't have a therapy yet, or something like the radius scan, you're going to probably struggle to get hold of one, simply for the reason that the radius scans and the radio codes come from Russia, and pretty much all trade's been cut off in most of the world. Oh, shit, that's hide and background, unless it's going to go down. But that's worrying. But again, with what's going on, that wouldn't surprise me if the radiation is going up, but let's see if it settles. But yeah, anyway, so that might be settling now, hopefully, unless there's contamination. Is there contamination on my finger? Let's take the cover off a moment. It's not the light doing it, is it? No, it might just have been jumping up a little bit. But yeah, there's so if you don't have a radius scan or radio code from Russia, and at this point you probably can't get them unless you're buying them from a seller outside of Russia, and similarly with like a therapy or a therapy Plus, the eco test counters, because they're from Ukraine. Again, both companies make very good counters. You're probably not going to be able to get those anymore. So what I would recommend, the only brand new series of dosimeters I know that are currently built, and when I say dosimeters I'm just meaning in general terms radiation dose meters, anything like that. The only ones I know of that are currently being mass-produced anyway, in service I can think of that aren't like Radioscans, Radiocodes, or like Ecotest models, are probably like the GMC ones, like the GMC 300s, GMC 500s. Again, there's loads of surplus meters because I do lots of videos on them. You can see a couple in the background there, some of the CDV stuff down there, when the old Polish units up there, because I'm pointing in reverse. The Plessy PDRM82 hanging up there as well. There are lots and lots of surplus meters, and some of them will still be fairly good, even if they're not completely accurate. But bear in mind, you know, you do need to know what you're getting, because Geiger counters, ionization chambers, and all that are different things. And if you're not buying one for the right type of radiation reading, they're not really any use. For most people, I would say go for a basic Geiger counter, because at least that's going to tell you if radiation is higher than normal. They're not good for normally doomsday scenarios, but you know, if it ticks away at background and then it starts ticking faster, you know, you've got like contamination on you or whatever, or you ought to get into cover. But as I've said, you can't really survive a nuclear war unless it's a very limited exchange. Again, it's also going to depend where you are in the world, sort of if you have a fallout shelter in your house, you know, lots of factors come in. But for the people just worrying about radiation in general, some of the Chinese meters, as I've said before, are alright. Things like, whatever they're called, like something like BRD6 or something. They only go to 99.99 microsieverts, but again, that will cover background radiation and quite a lot higher than background radiation. Oh, there are things like these, what do they call them? Radex brand ones as well. So they're alright, but again, this particular one doesn't go very high. So I'd probably recommend the Chinese ones over those, even though the build quality of that is much better. But there you go. There are lots of brands to choose from, but just bear in mind you're probably going to struggle to get the really good Ukrainian, like modern Ukrainian, modern Russian Geigers at the moment, and other things like that, just because of what's unfortunately going on. You know, the Ukrainian ones, because I doubt the factories at the moment are very concerned with making their Geiger counters and shipping them to you with everything going on in Ukraine. And the Russian ones, even though it's no fault of the companies that make them, just because of all the embargoes going on. So yeah, anyway, but like I said, bombing a nuclear reactor facility is a stupid thing to do, even though they didn't thankfully hit the actual reactor building. It was like a storage building, wasn't it, they hit? Or like a training building on the site. But still, if you're an attacking army, you probably just want to surround the plant or whatever, or just cut power lines further down from there. Like, you know, the power being supplied, just cut it off from various places, rather than deciding to bomb a reactor site. Nothing Putin's doing at the moment is very logical, in my opinion.